Okay, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really cool update for you from the brand Bomberg. A little bit about them. They're an independent Swiss luxury lifestyle brand whose design aesthetic is typically heavily tattoo art inspired. And normally I'd be featuring a wild card watch of theirs, which, would be described as an eccentric and sometimes even over the top styling standout kind of statement piece on the wrist that's equal parts conversation piece as it is timepiece. But this is actually somewhere on the more versatile vein of an everyday watch. So I'm really excited to kind of share this with you. It's an evolution of their Neo automatic line. This is their Metropolis line actually, and this is the Geneva unit. And specifically, the Metropolis Geneva is probably named after the Swiss city that has been synonymous with fine watchmaking for centuries. Geneva, with its rich history, has helped shape the industry as we know it today. And the Metropolis Geneva stands as a testament to that legacy. These are limited to 200 pieces and go for $19.95 direct from the brand. And I have to say, this is definitely one of my favorite releases of theirs in some time. I've been constantly impressed with their execution and their, I think, value proposition for a while, but typically their watches have just been a very specific thematically, making them a little bit less versatile for everyday use. Whereas I feel like this awesome Metropolis line definitely takes it a step in that other direction where it's something that can absolutely be worn every day, versus something that feels like, hey, this is this really standout theme heavy piece. This is something that I think actually just has the chops to compete on a daily basis for your wrist time. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, I absolutely love this one. So for a lot of reasons, I've always been impressed with kind of this case setup. I will say, of course, actuating the crown at 12 is a little bit different and slightly more difficult than it would be when you typically have it at the 3 o'clock, but they do a good job of giving you a nice oversized crown. But for me, right, like this pattern, although some of you might know it as a frag pattern, of course, my time in the Marine Corps, I'm going to be thinking of that frag grenade pattern. This is actually a very famous type of pattern that goes way back into kind of the history of Swiss luxury. But for me, I love that it's here on this green dial with this type of shape case. It just makes me feel like this is like an awesome kind of grenade style of watch. Like it really hits those marks, and then you get it on this great strap. Although this is optional, you can get it on a bracelet, although I previously did review a braceleted model from the same kind of line. So I did want to change things up for this particular video, but you can see this is really well done, super soft and supple, and definitely does help in terms of the wear profile there. So very, very nice. Let's go ahead and move this out of the way here and really just kind of enjoy some of the details on this really interesting piece. So 43 millimeter diameter. Some of you might say, hey, that's really big. 14.7 millimeters thick. Some of you might say, hey, that's really thick. Well, I will say it's only 12.4 millimeters if you don't count the crystal. And a lot of it just has to do with more so the short design here in terms of the case, although it does ultimately have a decently long lug to lug at about 53.2 millimeters. Because of the integrated lugs and that downturn, it's not going to wear like a 53 millimeter long watch. And then because of the lugless design, it's definitely not going to wear like a 43 millimeter diameter watch. This is going to wear closer to, I'd say, 41, but it does have a large expansive dial that does push to the outskirts. It does have a relatively thin bezel. But you can see that sloped chaptering is really handsome there. And yeah, this thing is just cool. I just, when I first saw the release, I was almost like taken aback. Like, oh, is this an older model they've re-released? Just because of, some of their newer releases have just been like really cool and funky over the top pieces. But you know, for me, and I think for most collectors, you kind of do look for something, especially within this price point, that you can wear more often than not, right? And I think that's where you really get a great value proposition here, because this can absolutely be a daily type of watch. So your sapphire crystal is a double dome, and it does have AR coating, so you can see even at very harsh angles, still very legible. And that thing is really hard to spot unless you put like direct reflection on it. But otherwise, you're going to notice that this thing is just beautiful, and you can just really enjoy the details of that dial and the way the light is going to play off of the glorious textures there. The crown is screw down, and it is signed. So I know that can be a point of contention for many folks. So you'll be happy to find this here, that it is signed, and it's actually really beautifully constructed. Let's just take a second to look at that. Oh, also while we're at it, look at those bevels. My goodness. Let me give it a quick wipe here just to really get the full Monty when it comes to just how nice this thing is finished. But the crown itself is very, very nice. I mean, the case, definitely very cool, very different, guys. I love the angles here that you're going to see. Give it a quick little dust off there. And you can see this thing is really cool. Again, I will say that the actuation on this 12 o'clock crown, I mean, I'm glad this isn't a hand wound movement and it isn't automatic. So you just have to just get it going with a couple of winds, you know. But this is definitely one where it is going to be a little bit harder to set, but I think it's worth it, right? Because you do get this really cool aesthetic where it's very, very balanced. And just it's just a different look. And that's something that I think comes off really, really nice. And my goodness, look at that finishing there. So of course this is a, you know, beautifully done piece, and then you get to the back and you do get, of course, a display case back where you're seeing the information there, 1 of 200. It's not numbered as in like which edition out of 200, but this is a 200 unit limited run. You're seeing that, of course, it is Swiss made, and you're seeing that Sellita SW200 movement. And then getting back to this side, you're going to see that beautiful olive green, you know, grand tapestry dial there, which is really, really nice. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Grande tapisserie dial. But just if you're questioning what I'm talking about, go ahead and like look up the dial on the AP Royal Oak in terms of, you know, the pattern of dial there. Beautifully done, though. We do have the date at 6 o'clock, which I think is great. Right above the 6, right underneath the automatic text there. So balanced, so symmetrical. You're getting polished hour and minute hands that are also skeletonized and loomed, and then you get this really cool, of course, signature seconds hand, which is orange with that nice white tip on it there for great legibility. Although surprisingly enough, that all glows, like even the whole second hand, which I think was a really fun touch there. And I know we all love loom, and that can also be a big kind of you know, sign in terms of your value per dollar, and, you know, like applied indices or signed crowns. There's a certain things that people just equate value to. Hey, they didn't skimp, they didn't cheap out, they did something that was harder and more difficult and more expensive. And then we get into the loom, which is Swiss Superluminova. It does glow green. I'm not sure what the exact compound that's used, though. It does have 100 meters of water resistance thanks to that screw down crown, which is fantastic. You're seeing these great integrated lugs. It's available on this great silicone strap or a stainless steel bracelet. You can see this is the matching olive green silicone strap, which tapers from about 26 millimeters down to 20 millimeters, and then this milled, very chunky and nice, I think well balanced buckle there, because you think about how chunky and thick the watch case is. It's nice to have that big corresponding buckle there to offset while it is on the wrist. So with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, check that out. Yes, it looks really cool. Look at how much light plays off of that dial. It just goes from dark to pops. And because of that geometric pattern, it definitely catches light in a lot of interesting ways. Of course, if I put it too close to the camera there, you're going to get a good amount of lens distortion, which is going to kind of warp your view of this, and it's going to seem a lot larger on wrist. So what I like to do is kind of keep my hand a little bit further away and then just kind of tighten the shot so you can get a more realistic idea of how this might render on your own wrist. I do have a 7.5-inch wrist, so it is on the larger side, but you can see there's plenty of room on this one. And then of course the style, it's a larger sized watch. Although I think it is nicely sized and well proportioned, it still is for those that do enjoy a larger watch. But you can see here, it doesn't really sit too far off of the wrist for those of you that might be a little, hesitant about trying something like this. I will say that this integrated setup just makes it flow around the wrist really, really well. And you can see I do enjoy those little details that just kind of pop in the light and play with it. So very, very cool. Great turn down on the lugs. The case just sits beautifully flat on the wrist, and I really do like that. So with all that said, let's go ahead, take this off the wrist, set it up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, very, very cool on the loom front there, guys. That signature seconds hand with that counterweight balance, of course, playing off of the large 12 o'clock. So you are going to get really easy orientation in the dark, even though, of course, when you look at the dial, it's typically going to be rendering as, super balanced and symmetrical. The nice thing is because of that choice for the 12 o'clock, it does give you a nice little orientation, even in the dark, even if the watch isn't on your wrist. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or maybe just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree or spending some time in your favorite automobile. So it's nice to see what these colors, finishes, and textures render like in less than optimal lighting, to even include some harsh lighting that typically could expose any type of production defects. But all you're going to see here is just a little bit of grease from my fingerprints all over the gorgeous finishing on this watch. Man, look at the depth of that dial, the way just the little cracks play with the light a little bit differently versus the way that those protruding, look at the brush there on the top surface of the dial. It's just, there's so much color play and texture and light that this thing just, it just ignites underneath the right lighting situation. So I find that very cool. And of course, I think it's a great juxtaposition off of how sleek it is as it just hugs around the wrist, of course, with that integrated bracelet and strap design. My gosh, that dial. The green on here is really, really something special. Check out the legibility there. The applied indices are reflecting light. The loom, of course, is exuding some radiance, and then of course the dial itself is choosing to reflect and refract light in tons of different ways to give you a lot of great visual interest there. So really, really fun piece for me, standout piece. Closing thoughts on the wrist wears surprisingly well for such a bold piece, to be completely honest. I mean, this thing, again, it wears like a large sports watch because that's what it is, but it doesn't wear oversized, which I can really appreciate, especially with the more restrained aesthetic, which also makes sure that the visual weight isn't overly loud either. Now, in terms of model variants, definitely check the site links for options and availability, as there's pretty much, there's different Metropolises based and dedicated to different themes. Some of them can be a little bit more polarizing, while others can be similar to this type of pattern with just maybe a different color to it, whether it be black or maybe even like a robin's egg Tiffany blue. So check those out. There's definitely some really fun ones also available. In terms of comparable models, this is tough, right? Because this is somewhere in between kind of that wild card, but it's also a daily versatile wild card type of watch. So I think this one is just such a fun statement piece. Somebody who has this, it's just, you're not taking yourself too seriously, but you do, love quality and value, and you can appreciate all these fine little details that are here, right? And then, of course, you can appreciate the brand for what it does and its aesthetic and its kind of more lifestyle oriented, message. So very, very cool. Bottom line, this has to be the most versatile Bomberg watch I've tried yet. And there's always a ton of these are always just a ton of fun when I do get my hands on these, which I appreciate. And now, thanks to the Metropolis collection, it's even more wearable, this brand. And I think daily situations, this will really be right at home, and especially with that classic dial aesthetic, which you guys have seen become more and more popular. People do love a good textured dial, and this definitely has some mainstream love for it, right? But then there's also kind of the youth play, right, who don't necessarily see this as the same pattern that AP has made very, very famous. That to see it as this really cool grenade, or waffle style pattern. And I think it's just a lot of fun. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do it like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.